selling the assets and paying off the debts, and all the proceeds of the sales have been received, then PSAM will disappear. Selling the assets, the former assets of NAPOCOR.
Yes, Senator Mark Villar will sponsor it to interpolate this Senator Gatchalian.
Senators Mark Villar and Gatchalian are hereby recognized.
The original mandate of PSAM. In simple terms, PSAM's mandate was to sell the assets, and all the proceeds that it will collect will be used to pay off the debts. I think 30 years ago, if I'm not mistaken, Mr. President. And in fact, when I went back to the transcript of the discussions on PSAM, Senator John Osmeña said, PSAM was conceived as a special purpose vehicle simply to warehouse all of the obligations of the NPC and to handle the sale of the assets.
PSAM, the Power Sector Assets and Liabilities Management Corporation, is a government-owned and controlled corporation that manages the sale and privatization of assets. Baka pagdating ng panahon, wala nang asset yung gobyerno para sa sunod na henerasyon. Puro private na ang may-ari. Kawawa naman ang mga Pilipino.
And he went on saying, PSAM is a transitory vehicle. At the end of the day, when all the debts of NPC shall have been liquidated and all the proceeds of the sales have been received, then PSAM will disappear. So the intention of PSAM, even this was in the transcript dated October 15, 2001. Mr. President. So it was clear during the deliberations that time that PSAM's life is limited because it has a single task of selling the assets and paying off the debts, Mr. President. And that was the whole rationale why during that time the Senate created PSAM, Mr. President. So Mr. President, let me ask the good sponsor, what is the rationale now of extending PSAM, because the original intent of PSAM is to have a limited life, Mr. President. So, what is now the rationale why PSAM is being extended?
Yes, Mr. President, at this point, though the PSAM has made many strides, great strides towards liquidating or selling the assets, the former assets of NAPOCOR, there are still some liabilities that remain. So I think it's important that we, in order to dispose of these assets, at the same time make sure that these liabilities are not passed on directly to the national government. I think it's important that we give them some more time just to wrap up the just to wrap up their mandate.
To date, Mr. President, how much? Let me maybe backtrack a little bit. How much debt did PSAM absorb 30 years ago?
Yes.
And how much debt is remaining right now, Mr. President?
Yes, at the peak of its debt obligation, which was in 2003, the debt of PSAM was at 1.24 trillion pesos, and as it stands today, in 2024, 7.2 billion pesos, which represents a decrease of 78% from its peak level.
Okay. And what, if I remember it correctly also, Mr. President, that the intention, if ever PSAM will not completely liquidate the debt or completely pay off the debt, it's national government who will absorb the debt. And it will form part of its debt stock, meaning national government will eventually liquidate it. So with that in mind, Mr. President, what can national government cannot do that PSAM can do? Because national government can obviously pay off the debt even in the absence of PSAM. But what can PSAM do that the national government cannot do insofar as debt repayments or debt payments are concerned?
Well, I think with regards to the liquidation of the assets, of course, the PSAM has a greater familiarity. If we dissolve the organization, the national government would have a difficult time picking up where they left off. I think there might be some time lost during the transition, and it's also important to note that the PSAM also has existing operations. There are still some power generating assets that the PSAM manages, So, of course, in terms, there might be some transitional problems because there are operational concerns also there are existing operations within the PISAM that might be affected should PISAM dissolve and all its assets reverted back to the national government.
But Mr. President, I understand in the past discussions with PSAM, on the debt side, it's not so much of a problem because government can absorb it, national government can absorb it and pay it off as how we do it with other loans. What the good sponsor is saying, what his honor is saying is the remaining assets that will be sold off.
They might be affected by any transition to the national government because obviously I don't know what agency would be able to step in immediately and operate these assets. But at the same time, I think over the years somehow PISAM has developed expertise in the selling of its assets, and that kind of knowledge is something that might be effective should the PISAM dissolve. So we find it more efficient for us to extend it further. Now, whether or not how many years, we can, of course, we're open to any amendments regarding as to the length that we want to set. But I think in the interest of efficiency, it would be more prudent to extend the PSAM so that you can give them a little more time to finally wrap up. It's because as I mentioned earlier, it's already been reduced significantly up to 78%. So I feel that we just need to give it a little more time to wrap up its operation so that it can fulfill its original mandate rather than abruptly cutting it and perhaps affecting the existing operations of its assets. At the same time, maybe delaying the disposition of the final few assets of PISAM.
Which part of PSAM's operation needs additional 25 years of wrapping up, Mr. President? Because again, no, debt can be paid. It's just a matter of programming. But which part of PSAM's operation needs additional 25 years of wrapping up, Mr. President?
Yes, I think at this point, there are certain generating assets that remain. Just to give you an idea, Mr. President, the generation assets consist of the approximately 1,000 megawatt Agus Pulangi and in the Mindanao region, and also there's two power plants under IPP contracts, namely the 796 megawatt Caliraya, Botocan, Kalayaan, and in the Luzon region, and the 200 megawatt Mindanao coal-fired thermal plant. So these are some of the assets that need to be also disposed of. At the same time, the PISAM also has numerous real estate assets that that account for a total area of 12,298 hectares. So these are also disposable assets that will also need to be liquidated in the near future.
How much is the value of the assets of PSAM? What is the remaining value of the assets of PSAM right now, Mr. President?
The remaining assets, the value, it could range, and it's quite broad, but the range can be between 118 and 230 billion pesos. So those are just the assets. But of course, they have receivables also accounting for 110 billion. And they also have proceeds from their concessions amounting to 51 billion.